Two men are encased in a thin metal shell, plummeting toward a jagged, monoclimatic landscape of craters and boulders. They are traveling at thousands of miles an hour in a vacuum, riding a controlled explosion down to a hostile surface. As they fall, their voices and vital signs are being transmitted back to Earth. Roughly 600 million people, 1/5 of the global population, are listening to their descent in real time. Every listener knows there are only two paths remaining. The crew will either execute a landing that borders on the impossible, or they will die on live television. This descent serves as the final movement in a geopolitical war that had been building for over a decade. 12 years earlier, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik. The sight of this metallic sphere and the sound of its radio transmission overhead created sudden panic in the United States. It proved the Soviets possessed an orbital and technological superiority that America could not match. Declassified intelligence reports from the U.S. Army revealed the depth of that fear. Analysts concluded the Soviets were actively planning to establish a military outpost on the moon by 1967. To counter this threat, President John F. Kennedy spoke directly to families like this one, committing the nation to a strict, near-impossible deadline. He mandated that the United States would land a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth before the decade closed. With the Soviet Union targeting a lunar landing for the 50th anniversary of their revolution, Washington saw the moon as the next military high ground. The Apollo program was the mobilization required to seize that ground before the window of opportunity closed. Breaking Earth's gravity required a machine of staggering scale. The Saturn V rocket stood over 300 feet tall, operating as a massive silo packed with highly volatile fuel, waiting to be ignited. Strapped to the top of this explosive tower were Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. They would ride it into the vacuum of space for a 3-day transit to the moon. As they traveled, they were being chased. The Soviet Union had launched Luna 15, an uncrewed robotic probe racing across the same void to reach the lunar surface first. The initial flight path for Apollo 11 was designed as a free return trajectory. If anything went wrong, orbital mechanics would naturally slingshot the spacecraft around the moon and send it safely falling back to Earth without requiring a major engine burn. The crew had to abandon that safety net. By firing their engine to slow down, they broke the loop, committing themselves to a tight, inescapable orbit. Once locked in orbit, Armstrong and Aldrin climbed into the lunar module, the Eagle, and physically detached from the main command module, Columbia. Michael Collins remained behind in Columbia. While his two crewmates began their dangerous descent to the surface, he stayed in a lonely holding pattern above them. Collins later documented his secret terror, the psychological dread that the Eagle would crash, leaving him with the burden of flying back to Earth entirely alone. His absolute isolation in the command module embodied exactly how fragile the mission was. If the Eagle failed, there was no rescue. The Eagle began its plunge with the violent ignition of the descent engine, dropping the fragile craft out of orbit. Almost immediately, tracking data revealed an anomaly. The lunar module was traveling too fast, pushing them miles west of their targeted landing zone. Then, the guidance computer became overwhelmed by conflicting radar data. It triggered the 1202 program alarm, signaling it was dropping tasks to keep up. Inside Mission Control, engineers had seconds to interpret the alarm. They chose to trust the core hardware, telling the crew to ignore the flashing warnings and continue the descent. But the overloaded computer was steering them directly toward a massive, boulder-filled crater. Landing there would instantly destroy the spacecraft. Seeing the danger, Armstrong deactivated the automated system. He took manual control, physically flying the module horizontally to skip over the deadly rocks. Every second he spent searching for clear ground burned precious fuel. The remaining propellant countdown ticked toward empty as he fought to stabilize the craft. Finally, the descent engine shut off. The lunar dust settled, and Armstrong radioed Houston to confirm that Tranquility Base had been established. Hours later, a specialized Westinghouse camera broadcast their first steps. They deployed a plaque declaring they came in peace, leaving the base of the Eagle parked permanently in the dust. When the advanced technology of the era faltered, raw human nerve and manual piloting salvaged the mission. Leaving the surface required relying entirely on the ascent stage engine. It was a single, untested piece of hardware that had to fire perfectly the first time to carry them back to Columbia. Meanwhile, the Soviet Luna 15 probe met a violent end. It suffered a malfunction and crashed into the lunar surface just hours before the Americans lifted off. Following a successful splashdown in the Pacific Ocean, the returning crew was immediately placed into strict biological isolation to protect Earth from any hypothetical lunar contamination. That safe recovery fulfilled the challenge set by President Kennedy. It decisively ended the geopolitical space race and established American technological supremacy. As Armstrong stepped onto the surface, the television broadcast bridged national borders for 1 billion viewers. The mission's success transformed a victory of Cold War engineering into a shared human milestone. Yet the sheer improbability of landing on the moon has fueled modern conspiracy theories. People continue to deny the achievement simply because the scale of the success is so hard to comprehend. Today, researchers are utilizing advanced AI language models to combat these doubts, using vast databases of physical evidence to dismantle the persistent myths. Despite its origins in military fear, and despite modern skepticism, the physical proof of Apollo 11 remains intact. The footprints, the instruments, and the base of the Eagle are still there, etched quietly into the lunar surface.